So today we're going to talk about giving yourself your IV fluids at home. Your doctor has ordered for you to get a bag of IV fluids, sometimes once a day, every day, sometimes a few days a week. And the medication or IV fluids will come in a bag like this. Or I'm going to open this. And sometimes it comes already out of the package. With the label, instead of half on this, the label will be on your bag of IV fluids like this. And your bag of IV fluid label will have your name, what you're getting, your doctor's name, and then the other side will tell you what kind of IV fluids it is. It's very frequently this one, 0.9% sodium chloride. But there are other kinds of IV fluids that the doctor could order for you. When you're doing this at home, you will have had an IV nurse come out to the house and talk you through this, and they will have left you some information that we'll refer to today as we go through this. You'll also have IV tubing, which I'm going to take out and get ready. Usually comes with something holding it all together. I'm going to remove. It's usually just paper. When you open up your IV tubing, there's two ends. One end with a big spike on it. It's going to go into our bag of IV fluids. The other end has a part that's going to screw onto your IV. Then inside the tubing itself, there's something in the middle that we're going to use to adjust the rate that the doctor has ordered for this to go at. We'll talk about that. There's a filter. This filter's job, once it's filled with the fluid, is to catch air bubbles or bacteria or any little pieces of medication that could be in your bag that didn't dissolve. And then there's a clamp in your tubing that clamps like this and unclamps. And this is what we call the drip chamber, where you're going to watch drops of fluid come out once we hang this. Then you're going to need your flushes. You're going to need 2 saline flushes that we're going to open and get ready. And if also ordered, you will get your heparin flush out and ready. You're going to need some alcohol wipes, a green cap, or sometimes they're orange, but a new cap to go on the end of your IV, and the gloves that you're going to wear. Once you have everything ready, it's a good time to now go wash your hands with soap and water at the sink. I want you to have a clean sink and area that you're going to use. I would like you to have liquid soap instead of bar soap and paper towels instead of cloth towels. And you're going to turn on the water at a temperature you're comfortable with. You're going to get your hands wet. Use some of your liquid soap. You're going to use the liquid soap on your wet hands, and you're going to soap all the way up to your wrists and in between your fingers and your nails. Get everything as soaked up and cleaned as possible. It's friction that does the cleaning, not just the soap. Antibacterial soap is great. And after you've been doing this for a little while, they say at least to the happy birthday song, or about 20 to 30 seconds, it'll be time to rinse. When you rinse, you start with the wrist and kind of come down. Use that friction again. Get those nails again and in between your fingers. I did a little bit of shaking, and it's nice to have paper towels. So I'm going to grab a paper towel and use your paper towels versus cloth towels to dry. Notice the water's still running. Dry between my fingers. And then use this to turn off your water. Throw away. Okay. So you've washed your hands with soap and water. Now we're going to get the syringes ready. And before you do that, we're going to put our gloves on. So these are non-sterile gloves, but they're still going to cover your hands even though you've washed them with soap and water to prevent any other kind of bacteria that could be left there from getting involved into your IV. So with each one of your syringes, you may have been taught by the nurse one of two things: either to remove the air bubble that's in here, and I tend to make sure that the air bubble is straight up and down, and then I'm going to come up until I get just fluid. Now I'm going to put the cap back on that I left upside down, and this one's ready. And you'll do the same with your others. So I'm going to again get that bubble right up at the top, push up and remove everything. Have the cap down at the bottom here and replace it. Or the nurse may have told you that instead of getting out the air bubble, you can flush everything with the air bubble at the top and just not give the air bubble. So I'll leave the heparin that way, and we'll talk about that. Okay, now that you have your flushes ready, it's time to put the tubing into the bag of fluid, hang it up, and get all the air out of your tubing. So your bag will have a place to pull off a plug, and don't want to touch anything that you open. And you want to take the cap off of this and not touch it. And then you're going to put the tubing tip in here and push and twist a little until when you squeeze you can see water's coming out. And I'm going to clamp this little clamp so it doesn't get away from me. Now I'm going to hang the bag up on the IV pole. I'm going to hang the bag up on the IV pole, and you can see that there's a little bit of fluid in this drip chamber. And now we're going to get all of the air out of this tubing by opening this clamp and making sure that the dial-a-flow is on open. Now I'm going to unclamp this clamp, and the fluid's going to start dripping in here and running through. And I'm going to watch for it to come dripping off the end of my IV tubing. Even though the cap is on here, it will drip. And I'm also going to be ready to clamp this clamp when it does drip. There's all these little bubbles that are in this IV tubing. We're going to do our best to try to get most of them out. I'm going to put the tubing over a trash can and open this clamp again and move some of them through. A few little bubbles are not a big deal. It would take a lot of air and tubing to ever hurt somebody. But we're going to do our best to get most of them out. So I'm going to open this again and let these bubbles move. And you can see them moving. And when I think that I've gotten all or most of them out without losing all my IV fluid, I'm going to clamp this again. Now we're going to talk about how to actually hook this up to your IV and set the dial-a-flow for the right rate. Now we're going to go into where our IV is and get ready to use it. There'd be a cap on the end that you'd remove. And we're going to get ready to flush. You've been trained by your nurse for the right flushing technique called sash. The first S in sash is for saline. Then you administer your IV fluids. Then you're going to flush with saline again, and then heparin. So we're going to do this process now. So now I'm going to wipe the end of my IV with an alcohol wipe. with this technique. Get one of my saline flushes, remove the cap, and it's going to be a push and twist, drop. Unclamp your clamp to your IV. If you have more than one, unclamp any clamps that you have. And then your flushing technique with your salines should be push, stop, push, stop, push, stop, push, stop, push. Now I'm ready to hook up my IV fluids that I got ready. So I'm going to just swap this. So if I take this off, I don't touch anything, I can remove this cap. And again, just like your syringe, it's a twist and push. Now if something did happen when you were doing this, where you did touch this or drop it, then you'd have to clean it with another alcohol. You have plenty of alcohols, so you'd have to push, you'd have to now scrub and clean again. And we're going to put on the tubing, which is push and twist. All right, so you've got your line is flushed and you've put on the tubing, your clamps are open. Now it's time to set your dial of flow for the rate for your IV fluids that your nurse and doctor want this at. And they're going to tell you what that is. Most people run their IV fluids over 2 to 3 hours. Some people have to go slower. But they're going to tell you the rate to set this at. So if I have a bag of 1,000 cc's, this sets at 250, it's going to go over 4 hours. So I would set this here for 250. My clamps are open, but I have to undo this clamp. And now we're going to watch up in the drip chamber that everything's dripping. So while your IV fluids are running, you want to keep an eye on it every 10 or 15 minutes that things are dripping. If you were to stand up, it's going to slow down or stop, like I just did. And that's because basic physics, it's too high, your IV's too high and close to the IV. When you sit back down, it's going to drip. So it's important that if you do have to get up and go to the bathroom or do some things, that you keep an eye on that drip chamber and that it's always dripping. So we're almost finished with our bag of IV fluids. It's been dripping and we're getting to the very end. There's a little bit of fluid still left in the bag. And anywhere starting about now is fine. You don't have to get every little drop going into you. So right around here I'm going to stop my IV fluids with a clamp. So I've just clamped it, my IV is finished. I'm going to wash my hands. Since I haven't done anything but sit here with IV fluids running for a couple hours, I'm going to use the hand sanitizer this time. I'm going to get it between my hands, front and back of my hands, and up to my wrists and my nails. And then I'm going to put my gloves back on once I'm going to start working on my IV. Once again, these are your non-sterile gloves. So now that you're ready to discontinue your IV fluids, we're going to unscrew the fluids from your needleless injection valve. And if you're not going to have any more fluids today, and most people are not, then this whole bag of fluid and tubing are going to be thrown away. And now it's time to flush your IV. I'm going to open an alcohol. Clean the end of my IV. Pick up a saline, unclamp, push and twist. I'm still unclamped from IV fluids, and I'm going to use that technique of push, stop, push, stop, push, stop, push, stop, push, stop, push, stop. And now we have a heparin to do. So we're going to discontinue this or unscrew it. We're going to open this and attach. And this one, if you did leave a little air bubble in it, when you go to flush this, you do not need to use the push stop, but you could flush everything but the air bubble and stop. And then you can clamp your IV tubing with your slide clamp and any other clamps your IV might have. Unscrew these. You're going to now put on your cap. And your caps have a little wet sponge in it that has alcohol and usually chlorhexidine. And you're going to screw that on the end. And you're going to put your IV under here. Remove your gloves, and you are finished. I do want to remind you that your nurse and your pharmacy have sent you and given you instructions on how to do your IV fluids at home, and it's always nice to have these out. So there'll be something about how to flush with, and there'll be something with instructions on how to use the dial-a-flow, put the tubing into the bag, wash your hands. You can write your own notes on it and constantly use these until you get comfortable doing this yourself. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always talk to both your nurse, your home health nurse, and your pharmacy. They're always available to you 24/7 for any questions. Once you've been taught how to do this, please don't ever hesitate to call and ask if you have any concerns.